We use the word transition in a whole lot of different ways in special education, but today we're going to talk about the specifics of transition planning for teens. Transition planning inside of the IEP process. Welcome to this episode of the Special Education Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Witcher, and transition planning is a whole big process inside of our IEP process that a lot of times does not get the focus that it should have. So before we even get started, I'm going to let you know that I'm going to be referencing a book that's called Essentials of Transition Planning. I'm going to make sure you have the link so you can go grab it on Amazon. And you can put this into your library because whether you are a teacher or parent of students in elementary school or in high school, this is something that you need to have on your bookshelf because transition planning is critical to make sure that we do not have that feeling of the cliff at the end of the last day of school where it's like, well, the child's been in school and then tomorrow they're not. They hit that 22nd birthday, or sometimes in other states it's a age a little bit later than that. For some of you who are surprised, go ahead, look that up. Say, how long, can my child who has an IEP stay in school? And look that up for your state, or look that up for other states, and you'll see that it does vary. So that's really important for you to know. But for most states, it's going to be on the 22nd birthday. School's going to end. And a lot of times that just feels like the end of the world for families. It just feels like, what else? What am I supposed to be doing? I was not prepared for this. But we have this process inside of the IEP of transition planning that can absolutely support this piece of a child's education so that last day of school actually looks very, very similar to the first day of not having school, of not having those resources. If we do this transition right, it's not this like jumping off point where we're like, okay, something's over, start something new. No, we want to have this transition. So the first thing that I'm just going to pull from this book is we need to make sure that we're defining transition again, our transition planning essentials. And that's talking about the specific process as defined by IDEA law. So I'm going to go ahead and just read a little bit of this. I'm not even going to make you look it up. I'm going to just real quick summarize for you transition services according to IDEA law. Now remember, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm telling you where to look. I'm telling you what the exact law says. And it says, according to IDEA, the term transition services means a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that, 1, is designed to be within a results-oriented process that is focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the child with a disability to facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school activities, including post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, including supported employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, and community participation. And number 2, transition services, it's based on the individual child's needs, taking into account the child's strengths, preferences, and interests, and includes instruction, related services, community experiences, and the development of employment and other post-school adult living objectives, and if appropriate, acquisition of daily living skills and functional vocational evaluation. Now that sounds like a lot. That sounds like, transition planning, this has a lot of different moving pieces. Yes it does. Actually, when done right, there's a lot of moving pieces when it comes to transition planning. It should be that way. Unfortunately, a lot of times we're not giving the attention that we need to this area. So inside of this book, Essentials of Transition Planning, and one of the reasons I want you to grab it is because there are checklists and tools and things that you can use. You're going to put these in your toolbox and you're going to use them to make sure that you're not missing things that quite honestly are typically missed. As in, it is kind of the standard that all the details are not filled in on a transition plan. And I know many of you are like, what? like, but this is part of the IEP, this is part of the process, or a lot of times teachers are saying, I'm just doing what the district tells me to do. I understand that, but we have to really dig in as parents, as teachers, and say, maybe this is the way transition planning has been done in the past. Maybe when we had low expectations and we weren't sure what the world was going to look like and how the world might be filled with possibilities for adults with disabilities, maybe then it was okay to kind of just check the boxes and say, okay, here's an additional kind of piece inside the paperwork. But that's not okay anymore. It is not okay. See, we have an entire, opportunity. We have communities. We do have resources. Do we have as many resources as we should? No way. Do we have as many opportunities as we should? No way. But when you think back to the history, and again, if you're a listener at all, I do not like history. I don't talk about history in the way. I'm not going to give you a huge history lesson here, but I am going to let you know, my brother, who was born in 1977, okay, special education law was enacted in 1975. That means that he's the first generation of fully educated adults with disabilities, and the world had no idea what to do with him. When he graduated high school, my mom had to once again be the advocate for my brother, breaking the boundaries of what is expected or what is possible for adults with disabilities. We need to get beyond that, right? So here we are. He has graduated 20-some years ago from high school, and she's still working on breaking those boundaries and making sure that he is living his best life, which she does a fantastic job. I'm always proud of my mom, who is, working in all of these new areas. But here's the thing. When I go back into the school system and I see what's happening right now, when I'm working with master IEP coaches who are then helping families navigate this IEP process, I'm seeing the same struggles, the same thing that was happening back in the 80s and 90s for my family. I'm seeing the same thing happening right now, and it doesn't need to be that way. And sometimes the simplest tools, like a transition planning checklist, can help fill those gaps. So let me just give you an example. There are 7 points on this transition planning checklist, and I'm going to give them to you here because I'm telling you there are more things inside of this book that you're going to need. So let me just kind of give you a taste of one of the checklists that's inside of this Essentials of Transition Planning. Let's see, transition planning checklist. This is for teachers to consider. Number 1, has the student and his or her family provided input into choices of how the adult with disability is going to be participating in post-secondary education, employment, community living, and other post-school options. So the first question you're talking about is the family participating. See, we always want parents participating inside of the IEP process, right? We want that, but this becomes more critical. The older a child gets, the more critical it gets that the family is involved, because that end of the school bus showing up to bring them every day to school, that's going to end, and the parents are going to be responsible at that point, right? So we have to get parent involvement at a whole new level. Number 2, has there been participation from well-informed parents and guardians? And I love this. They clarified this in number 2, well-informed, meaning have we taken the time to make sure that the parents or the guardians truly understand what needs to happen during transition planning? Has a plan been developed for the student that includes annual goals and the steps necessary to attain the goals? See, here's what I see on transition plans a whole lot. I see these big goals, and I see no plan to get there, because the paperwork is different than a typical piece of the IEP, so it's not quite broken down a lot of times, depending on whatever software, whatever program the school is using. It's not always broken down the same way that a goal would be broken down. So we need to make sure that this transition plan is broken down into the necessary steps. Number 4, does the plan specify who is responsible for each aspect of the transition process, including referral to appropriate agencies, job placement, on-the-job training, and job follow-up? Huge. Who is doing what, and do we have these areas covered? Number 5, have there been coordinated efforts on the part of all appropriate agencies, including vocational rehabilitation, counselors, community rehabilitation providers, developmental disability service providers, disability support personnel at 2- and 4-year colleges or universities, and post-school vocational education programs? are we coordinating all these people? It is a difficult task to get everybody coordinated at the school level, right? And now we have to get local agencies involved. That's why we need a checklist even more than before, because we are not just talking about, like, do we have parents and teachers on the same page, but now we have to get agencies involved that are in our community, and it's not always the easiest thing to do. Number 6, is the plan user-friendly? Is it easy for the student and parents to understand and take ownership of? Huge. So we have to not only get parents and students involved in developing this next level transition plan, but we have to get everybody's kind of buy-in and ownership of, like, this is not just about the teacher teaching something. This is not just about learning a new skill. This is about working together as a team on a whole new level. And number 7, has the student participated in work experience prior to graduation in a part-time or summer job or paid internship or other work opportunity? Yes, we need to get true employment experience, not just jobs around the school campus. My goodness, I'm just going to call it out. If I see somebody else saying, like, our big job goal is to have a child shredding paper effectively, like, we live in a digital world. Cut it out. If I see that, we have school jobs where it's almost that our students with disabilities are serving everybody else inside the school community because it's a convenient way. And by serving, I mean anything from, only the students with disabilities are doing the recycling. Only the students with disabilities are cleaning the lunchroom. Only students with disabilities are, you fill in the blank of what school task or school chore. I've seen it back in the 80s, I've seen it in the 90s, and I've seen it every decade since. So we need to start working on true employment and what that looks like. Yes, do I think that participating in school jobs when it's everybody's responsibility and having more of an inclusive type, we all take care of our school? Absolutely. But when we're talking about transition planning, we're talking about getting honest to goodness, like, work experience that's going to make a difference. Inside of this guide for your essentials of transition planning, you're also going to learn about person-centered planning, so very important. That's a strengths-based model versus a deficit-based model. And that's critical as we're looking into transition planning, is to find a child's strengths and to start to build on those, like double down on what is the child good at, what can we take from good to great, what can we take from, we've almost got that, this skill, to mastery, so we can have as much independence as possible. I want to give one final thought on our transition planning, putting together these plans at a whole new level, and that is to remember that community inclusion begins with school inclusion. I say this often. I was reading this book and I looked in at one of the end chapters here, and I saw that and I was like, yes. I've been traveling and delivering professional development to teachers, and I've been traveling and delivering IEP workshops to parents all across the country for a very, very long time, but specifically these last couple years, it's been just kind of suitcase packed all the time and going to different conferences and delivering, and especially when I'm in a room full of teachers, I make sure that they understand that how they treat and how they invite students with disabilities into their classroom is demonstrating at the highest level of how their peers, meaning the students' peers, should be treating and inviting students with disabilities. See, it's important for us to have this display of inclusion and true inclusion, like true invitation to be part of the school community, starting as soon as possible, and especially when we get to the older years, our teen years, because the peers in school, while we're working on transition planning, and I'm talking about, where are the agencies and where are the parents and where are the guardians, and what is this going to look like, and what does post, educational, program look like, and where's the vocational support, and where are all these things? The people who are in the classroom with our students, who are in their phase of transition planning, they're going to be their neighbors, they're going to be their coworkers, they're going to be their bosses, and we need to make sure that we're checking all the boxes here during transition planning, including comprehensive inclusion practices to make sure that we are giving our adults with disabilities the best opportunity possible to be successful in whatever success means for them, to be their individual selves and to build on their strengths and to be a meaningful member of the community in a way where they are valued in a way that makes us all excited. It's disheartening still. I see, again, I mentioned my brother, right? So it is disheartening to see some of the pushback that is still happening for our adults with disabilities who are currently in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s. But guess what? Their peers right now, the adults in 40s, 50s, and 60s, they didn't go to school. And I don't mean like in the 1960s. I mean like they're 60 years old, right? They didn't go to school with people with disabilities. So our world has individuals, adults, making decisions right now. We're out in the community. Okay, they did not have the opportunity to experience how amazing it is when we all work together. We all have our unique, traits, and we all have our unique needs, and we all have our unique skills. We all have those things. So to be able to show this during our school years and say, look, here are the strengths. Look, here, this is how we include. This is how we work together as a team. This is how we value each other with our different strengths and weaknesses. This is a key part of our transition planning. If you have any questions about transition planning, I don't want you to kind of sit on that going, I don't know how this all works. There's not a lot of information a lot of times out there about transition planning. So again, go grab the book, Essentials of Transition Planning. And then if you have any questions about this, whether you're a parent, teacher, admin, therapist, I'm going to encourage you to reach out to the links below and go ahead and just ask us your IEP questions about transition planning. The Master IEP Coach team, our programs, we're here to support you and make sure that you have everything that you need so you can really truly fulfill your role in preparing every child for further education, employment, and independent living.